Hello friends, this is my true story, so watch till end. My name is Edward Patterson, and this is the truth of how I became a stranger in my own life before I became homeless on a street I used to own. At 87 years old, people assume your story is already finished, that whatever matters has already happened, that the final pages are quiet, predictable, merciful. I believe that too. I believe the worst thing waiting for me was a slow decline, a body that didn't cooperate, a mind that tired more easily than it used to. I didn't know the real danger was trust. I didn't know the most violent thing in my future wasn't death, but betrayal dressed up as care. 3 years before everything collapsed, my health began slipping faster than I could hide. The arthritis in my hands turned simple tasks into battles. Buttons became enemies. Cups trembled in my grip. Then came the Parkinson's. First a whisper, then a constant presence. My balance faltered. My hands shook when I tried to sleep. Living alone became risky in ways I could no longer deny. That was when my son called. Robert sounded concerned, warm, responsible. He told me he worried about me being alone. Said he and his wife, Linda, had talked it over and wanted me to come live with them. Said they wanted to take care of me properly. Said family should be together, especially at the end. Those words matter. Take care of you. They felt like relief, like safety, like I was still wanted. I remember sitting on my bed after that call, staring at the walls of my small apartment, realizing how tired I was. Tired of pretending I was managing. Tired of falling and not telling anyone. Tired of eating standing up because sitting hurt too much to get back up again. The idea of being surrounded by family felt like mercy. So I packed my life into boxes and suitcases. Not much fits when you've lived long enough to lose things piece by piece. I brought clothes, medications, photographs, papers I didn't think I'd ever need. I locked my apartment for the last time, believing I was closing one chapter gently. Robert helped me move into a large suburban house, a place with trimmed hedges, a wide driveway, quiet streets. He showed me a bedroom on the first floor and told me they'd set it up so I wouldn't have to deal with stairs. Linda smiled and said she'd made space just for me. The first weeks were peaceful. Linda cooked. Robert checked on me. They asked how I slept, asked if I needed anything. I remember thinking how lucky I was, not to be rich, not to be healthy, but to still belong somewhere. What I didn't know was that I was stepping into a story where the roles had already been rewritten without my consent. The truth revealed itself slowly, not all at once, not dramatically. The way poison works, small doses, unnoticed at first. One afternoon, months after moving in, I was searching for an old insurance document. My hands hurt, so I sat down at a desk drawer in the guest room, carefully sorting through papers. That's when I found it. The deed. My name. Clear. Undeniable. Legal language that doesn't lie to spare feelings. The house belonged to me. I remembered then. 15 years earlier, when I was still working, still steady, still thinking ahead. I'd bought the property as an investment, planned to leave it to Robert someday. When he needed a place, I let him move in. Rent-free. No contracts. No lawyers. Just trust. He'd lived there for over a decade. Built a life. Built habits. Built assumptions. And somewhere along the way, the truth slipped out of the story. Robert had invited me to live in his house. That's how he framed it. Like generosity flowing downward, like I was the dependent, like I owed gratitude. In reality, I had moved into my own property as a guest. I sat there holding the papers, feeling something heavy settle into my chest. Not anger, confusion, sadness. I realized Robert and Linda didn't see me as an owner. They saw me as an inconvenience they were tolerating, a burden they were carrying. I didn't correct them. That's important to understand. I could have said something. I could have reminded them. But I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to humiliate my son. I told myself family mattered more than paperwork. That love would regulate behavior better than law. That decision almost killed me. When Robert was home, everything looked perfect. Linda laughed. She asked if I'd eaten. She touched my shoulder when she passed. She played the role beautifully. But every morning, when Robert's car left the driveway, the house changed. The air hardened. Linda stopped smiling. She would come into my room early, yank open the curtains, and tell me not to come out until she said so. She didn't want to see me while she had her coffee. Sometimes she locked my door from the outside, said it was for my safety. Hours would pass. No breakfast, no lunch, just hunger sitting heavy in my stomach, making my hands shake worse than the Parkinson's ever did. When I asked for food, she told me to stop exaggerating. Said missing meals wouldn't kill me. Said I should be grateful she even bothered at all. Then, every evening, right on time, she transformed. At 6 o'clock, when Robert's car pulled in, she would set a full plate in front of me. Meat, vegetables, bread. She'd smile sweetly and call me Dad. Robert would watch with pride, complimenting her patience, her kindness. That dinner was often the first thing I'd eaten in 24 hours. I ate quietly, quickly, because I didn't know when I'd eat again. And Linda watched me the way someone watches a secret they're daring you to expose. She controlled everything. The bathroom, my medications, even my dignity. She made me ask permission to use the toilet. Sometimes she made me wait, sometimes too long. I was 87 years old, standing outside a bathroom door, praying my body would obey me one last time. When it didn't, she mocked me, made faces, called me disgusting, forced me to clean myself while she watched. She hid my medications, changed their places, pretended to forget. My Parkinson's medication needed timing. She knew that. When my tremors worsened, she told Robert the first was declining faster than expected, that I was becoming difficult. She made me wash their laundry by hand, said I couldn't be trusted with a machine. My hands cramped. My knuckles swelled. She laughed when I dropped wet clothes, told me I was useless. And always, she reminded me this wasn't my house. You should be grateful we let you stay, she'd say. You ruin everything. They'll be happier when you're gone. I believed her, because fear shrinks truth, and silence becomes survival. Until the day something broke. I was reaching for my medication on a high shelf. I hadn't eaten. My hands were shaking. My balance was poor. My elbow hit a picture frame. It fell. Glass shattered. Linda came running. But this time, she didn't hide it. She screamed. Years of hatred poured out. She called me clumsy, worthless, a parasite. She said I was destroying their lives just by existing, that I needed to get out. Now, she grabbed garbage bags, threw my clothes inside, my belongings, my life. I asked where I was supposed to go. She didn't care. She dragged the bags to the door and threw them onto the lawn. Then she pushed me. Hard. I nearly fell. She slammed the door and locked it. From inside, she screamed that the house was hers, that I was trespassing, that if I came back, she'd call the police. I stood there shaking, staring at the door. Then I sat on the curb, beside garbage bags, outside my own house. That's where chapter 1 ends, with an old man sitting in shock, realizing that silence had finally cost him everything. Before I tell you what it felt like to sit on that curb, I need you to understand something clearly. Being thrown out was not the beginning of my suffering. It was the conclusion. What happened on that front lawn only made visible what had been happening in silence for years. The house didn't turn cruel that day. It had been cruel long before. It had simply stopped pretending. For 3 years, I lived inside walls that watched me decay. Not naturally, not gently, but deliberately. Linda learned very early that control didn't need violence to be effective. All it needed was isolation and timing. Robert left every morning at the same hour, and with him went the version of Linda that smiled. The moment the garage door closed, the house became a different place. She would enter my room without knocking. Curtains ripped open like punishment, light flooding my eyes before my body was ready to move. She'd tell me to stay in bed, tell me I wasn't allowed in the kitchen. Sometimes she locked the door. Other times she didn't, but she didn't have to. Fear had already done the work. Hunger became my clock. By late morning, my stomach would twist into itself. By afternoon, dizziness crept in. My hand shook harder. When I asked for food, she accused me of dramatics. Told me old people always exaggerated discomfort. The cruelty wasn't random. It was precise. She needed me weak, but not dead. Broken, but functional enough to clean, scrub, and suffer quietly. When she starved me all day, then fed me in front of Robert, It wasn't kindness. It was camouflage. Robert praised her endlessly, told friends how lucky he was, how patient she was with his father. I watched him believe it, and I let him, because every time I considered telling him the truth, I imagined what would happen when he left again the next morning. Linda didn't just control my body. She controlled my future. She hid my medications, then watched my tremors worsen. She delayed doses until my hands shook uncontrollably, then told Robert my condition was deteriorating, that I might need professional care, that I was becoming too much. She framed her sabotage as concern. She timed my showers. 5 minutes, sometimes less. If I took too long, she shut off the hot water. I rushed through washing joints that barely bent, skin that needed care, emerging half clean and ashamed. Then she criticized me for smelling. Laundry days were the worst. She dumped piles of clothes into the bathtub and ordered me to scrub them by hand. My fingers screamed. My back burned. When I dropped wet fabric, she laughed. When I couldn't wring water out properly, she mocked me. Sometimes she made me do it all again. She enjoyed watching effort fail. The bathroom became a battleground. She made me ask permission like a child. Sometimes she said yes. Sometimes she made me wait, long enough that my body betrayed me. When accidents happened, she acted disgusted, told me I was pathetic, forced me to clean myself while she watched. That humiliation stayed with me longer than the pain. At night, I lay in bed listening to the house settle, wondering how a place I legally owned had turned into a cage, wondering how I had become invisible inside walls built with my own money. And still, I stayed silent, because silence felt safer than retaliation, because I had nowhere else to go, because at 87, fear feels heavier than pride. Until the day the glass shattered. That sound didn't just break a picture frame. It broke Linda's restraint. Her screaming was unfiltered hatred, years of contempt pouring out all at once. She called me useless, a burden, said my presence ruined everything, said I had stolen years of her life by existing. She didn't see a man. She saw an obstacle, and obstacles are removed. When she threw my belongings into garbage bags, she wasn't angry anymore. She was efficient. The decision had already been made long ago. When she shoved me toward the door, I understood something terrifying. She believed the house was hers. She believed I had no power, no rights, no witnesses. She believed that if she erased me quietly enough, the world would accept it. When the door slammed and locked, I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I stood there shaking, my body struggling to keep balance, my mind trying to understand how I'd gone from father to trespasser in a life I built. Then I walked down the steps and sat on the curb. Neighbors passed, looked away. Nobody asked questions. That's how abuse survives. Not because it's hidden, but because people don't want to see it. I sat there for over an hour, staring at torn garbage bags, clothes spilling onto grass, medications mixed with dirt. The house stood silent behind me. Warm lights on, curtains closed. My own house. And I wasn't allowed inside. That was the moment I understood something I'd been afraid to admit. Silence doesn't keep you safe forever. It just delays the damage. And now the damage was complete. I sat on that curb longer than I can properly explain. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because my body refused to accept that anything needed to be done at all. At 87, shock doesn't arrive loudly. It settles. It numbs. It makes movement feel optional. I stared at the torn garbage bags at my feet, watching the wind lift the corners of my clothes, exposing fragments of a life that had been reduced to refuse. The house stood behind me, unchanged. The same front door, the same windows, the same place I had gone to sleep believing I was safe. No one came out. No one checked. Linda didn't reopen the door. Robert wasn't home yet. The house remained sealed, as if I'd never existed inside it. People passed by, neighbors I recognized, faces I had nodded to over the years. They slowed, glanced, then looked away. A few hesitated like they might ask if I needed help, but none did. No one wants to step into a family problem, especially not when it looks uncomfortable. I didn't cry. Not then. Tears require energy. What I felt was hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of me and discarded somewhere I couldn't reach. Eventually, I realized sitting there forever wasn't an option. Linda had threatened to call the police. She'd said the house was hers. I had no phone, no witness, no strength for confrontation. I tried to stand. My legs screamed. My balance wavered. I grabbed the mailbox to steady myself, feeling foolish for needing metal and paint to keep me upright. My hands shook violently as I gathered my belongings back into the bags. Medications had spilled into the grass. Pills mixed with dirt. I brushed them off as best I could. Some were already ruined. I began walking. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The bags were heavy, awkward. Every few steps, they threatened to tear open again. I stopped often, leaning against trees, mailboxes, fences, pretending to rest while my heart hammered and my lungs struggled to keep up. 6 blocks felt like miles. I found a bus shelter as the sun began to sink. A bench, a roof, 3 open sides. It was the closest thing to shelter I could manage. I sat down, placing the bags at my feet like they were proof I still belonged to something. I checked my wallet. $23. No credit cards. Linda had taken them weeks earlier, saying I wasn't responsible enough to manage them anymore. My phone was gone too. She'd taken that as well, claiming she needed to update something. Never returned it. As night fell, the temperature dropped. Other people waited for buses. They looked at me, then moved away. Changed shelters. I became something they didn't want near them. A reflection of vulnerability, too close for comfort. I spent that night shivering on the bench. Sleep came in fragments. Every noise startled me awake. Footsteps, cars, laughter. I kept thinking someone would steal what little I had left. Or worse, I kept looking down the street toward the house. Lights glowed warmly behind curtains. I imagined Robert coming home, Linda greeting him, dinner on the table, a lie ready. She'd tell him I left, that I chose to go, that I wanted independence, and he would believe her. That realization hurt more than the cold. The next morning, my body felt like it had aged 10 years overnight. Stiff, weak, dizzy. I walked to 3 different shelters, all full, all apologetic. Elderly homelessness wasn't rare, they told me. Resources were thin. I stood in soup kitchen lines. Long lines. Hours standing. My legs ached. The food was barely enough. I lost weight quickly. My clothes hung loose. My reflection in windows looked unfamiliar. I slept on park benches. Sometimes the bus shelter if I got there early enough. Never lying down fully because the pain was too intense. Never sleeping deeply because danger never sleeps. By the 4th night, I was coughing. Deep, wet, painful. Fever came next. Pneumonia. I knew it even before anyone told me. Every breath burned. My lungs felt heavy, like they were filling with something solid. I had no way to get help. On the 5th night, 2 young men saw me sitting alone. An easy target. They shoved me, went through my pockets, took the $23 I'd been saving. I hit my head when I fell. They laughed when they saw how little they got. I lay there afterward, stunned. The money hurt. But what hurt more was realizing I truly had nothing left. Every night, I found myself near the house again. Not intentionally, just drifting, staring at the lights, watching shadows move inside. They were warm, federal safe. I was freezing outside, coughing blood, wondering if I would die on the street. Robert never came looking for me. No police, no calls, no concern. By the 7th day, hope thinned to something fragile. I started thinking maybe this was it. Maybe I would simply disappear the way Linda had intended. Quietly, inconveniently. Then, on the 8th morning, my body finally gave up. I was walking past a small office, tried to find a soup kitchen someone had mentioned. My vision blurred. My legs buckled. I reached for a parking meter and missed. I fell hard on the concrete. I couldn't get back up. Breathing felt impossible. My lungs rattled. The world narrowed. That's when a stranger ran toward me. That moment, collapsed on the sidewalk, was the first time someone saw me again. I don't remember hitting the ground as clearly as I remember the sound of my breathing afterward. It wasn't air moving in and out of my lungs. It was something thicker, something broken. Each breath rattled, wet and shallow, like my chest was filling with something it couldn't expel. I lay there on the cold sidewalk, staring at a patch of sky I couldn't focus on, thinking, not for the first time, that this might be how it ends. A voice cut through the noise. Sharp, urgent, concerned. A young man in a suit was kneeling beside me, his face tense, asking if I could hear him. I tried to answer, but the coughing took over. It racked my body so violently that I thought my ribs might snap. I tasted blood. He didn't wait for permission. I heard him call for an ambulance. Heard him tell someone on the phone that an elderly man had collapsed and couldn't breathe. He stayed with me, holding my hand, grounding me in the present when everything else felt like it was slipping away. The sirens arrived quickly. Paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher. Oxygen masked the burning in my chest just enough for me to stay conscious. The young man climbed into the ambulance with me, refusing to leave. He told them his name was Marcus Chun, a lawyer. Said he didn't think I should be alone. That was the first kindness I'd experienced in days. At the hospital, everything blurred into motion and light. Doctors, needles, lines, tests, words like severe pneumonia, dehydration, hypothermia. I drifted in and out, waking to the steady beep of machines and the feeling of being held together by strangers who treated me like I mattered. Marcus stayed. When I could finally speak without coughing uncontrollably, he asked gentle questions. How had I ended up on the street? Did I have family? Where was my home? So I told him. I told him about my son, about Linda, about the house, about the years of quiet cruelty, about the garbage bags, the curb, the cold, the hunger, the robbery. Every word came out heavier than the last. I expected pity. What I saw instead was anger. Controlled, focused, righteous. He asked who owned the house. I told him I thought my son did, but I wasn't sure. Then I remembered the papers. The deed I'd kept folded in my wallet like a relic from a life that no longer existed. I handed it to him. He read it slowly. Then he looked up at me and said something that changed everything. They threw you out of your own house. Not emotionally. Legally. Marcus explained it clearly. Calmly. What had happened wasn't just cruel. It was illegal. Elder abuse. Illegal eviction. Multiple violations that courts took seriously. For the first time since being thrown out, I felt something return. Validation. I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. I wasn't imagining it. I had been wronged. Marcus told me to rest. Said he would handle everything. And he did. While I recovered in the hospital, he filed emergency motions. Presented the deed. Spoke to a judge who was apparently furious at the situation. Within 24 hours, an order was granted. Sheriff's deputies were sent. Robert and Linda were served eviction papers. They had 48 hours. Marcus told me later what happened. Robert argued. Claimed ownership. Show mail. Bills. The deputies didn't care. Ownership wasn't a feeling. It was a record. And the record was clear. Linda screamed. Denied everything. Still believed the house was hers. Belief didn't matter. When the deputies left, their life cracked open the way mine had. Robert tried calling the hospital. Left messages. Claimed he didn't know. Claimed he was sorry. Marcus blocked the calls. Told me not to listen. I didn't want explanations anymore. 48 hours passed. Then the deputies returned. Robert and Linda were still packing. Desperate. Panicked. A moving truck half full. The deputies gave them 2 more hours. That was it. Marcus documented everything. Furniture left behind. Years abandoned. Linda crying. Robert silent. They were forced out of the house they believed they owned. I never went back. I sold it. $890,000. I used the money to buy something they never gave me. Safety. I live now in a senior community where my name is spoken kindly, where meals are guaranteed, where my medication is managed, where dignity isn't conditional. Robert calls sometimes. I don't answer. Linda tried showing up once. Security removed her. The distance is intentional. Because peace isn't forgiveness. It's protection. I was thrown out like garbage. So I took my house, my rights, and my life back. And I didn't look back. My name is Edward Patterson, and I want to tell you what survival actually looks like after the noise ends. Revenge is usually imagined as something loud, angry, explosive. People think it comes with shouting, confrontation, dramatic speeches. What I learned, very late in life, is that real consequence arrives quietly. It arrives on official letterhead, with signatures, with locks being changed by people who don't raise their voices at all. I never returned to that house. Even after the sheriff confirmed it was legally mine again, even after Marcus told me I could go back whenever I wanted, I refused. That place had already taken enough from me. Walls remember things. Floors remember. And I knew if I walked through that door again, I wouldn't feel ownership. I would feel haunted. So while my body healed in a hospital bed, I made the only decision that felt like freedom. I sold it. The house went on the market quickly. It didn't take long. Good neighborhood. Clean title. 15 years earlier, I'd bought it as a future gift. Now it became something else entirely. A release. The final sale price was $890,000. I signed the papers slowly, my hand still unsteady, my breathing still recovering. When the funds were transferred into a new account, one Robert and Linda had no knowledge of, I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when something heavy is finally set down. Marcus handled everything. He made sure my finances were protected. He made sure there were legal barriers between me and the people who had hurt me. He made sure no one could show up uninvited, unannounced, or demanding explanations they were no longer owed. Robert tried. He left messages. Long ones. Apologies tangled with confusion. Claims that he had no idea. That he would have stopped it if he'd known. That Linda had been stressed. That it was all a misunderstanding. What struck me wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. He never asked how I survived on the streets. He never asked where I slept. He never asked what it felt like to cough blood alone at night. He was grieving a house, not a father. Linda didn't apologize at all. She told anyone who would listen that she'd been cheated, that her home was stolen, that she'd been betrayed by a vindictive old man who turned on family. When she tried to come to the senior facility, demanding to see me, security escorted her out while she screamed in the lobby. They increased protection afterward. No one raised their voice at her. No one argued. They just enforced boundaries. That's what power looks like when it's earned back. I live now in a senior living community designed for people like me. People who need help, but not humiliation. People whose bodies are failing, but whose worth has not. I have my own suite. A real one. A bedroom. A small living area. A private bathroom that no one locks from the outside. Nurses who understand timing. Doctors who come to me. 3 meals a day served without performance, without punishment, without conditions. No one calls me a burden. No one makes me beg. The shaking in my hands is managed now. My Parkinson's hasn't vanished, but it no longer defines every hour of my existence. My health has stabilized. In some ways, improved. The body responds when it's no longer living in fear. Sometimes, late in the evening, I think about that curb. The torn garbage bags. The neighbors who looked away. The cold bench. The house glowing behind curtains. I think about how easily someone can be erased when silence becomes routine. How quickly dignity can be stripped when cruelty is hidden behind closed doors and politeness. Linda told me to stop disturbing them. So I did. I removed myself permanently from their comfort, their assumptions, their future plans built on something they never owned. They now live in a small apartment. 2 bedrooms. A rougher part of town. Rent that eats most of their income. Linda had to work again. Couldn't keep the job long. Robert's salary barely stretches far enough. They experience discomfort now. But what they lost wasn't the house. They lost control. And what I gained wasn't money. It was safety. At 87, I don't need apologies. I don't need explanations. I don't need reconciliation built on denial. I need peace. And peace, I've learned, is sometimes bought, not with revenge, but with truth, paperwork, and the courage to stop protecting people who never protected you. They threw me out like garbage. So I took what was mine, protected what was left of me, and walked away without looking back. That's not bitterness. That's survival. And for the first time in years, I'm no longer afraid of the silence.